Hello everyone. In the next lab we are going to work on proper use of glassware, and in order to do so we are going to compare the accuracy of three different measuring devices. Okay, so the first one that we're going to be using is a volumetric pipette. Okay, this is an instrument that is calibrated to measure 50 mLs and 50 milliliters only. Okay, we are going to use also a graduated cylinder. In this case, this is a 50 ml cylinder. However, you can measure anywhere between 5 and 50 milliliters. And last but not least, we are going to use a 250 milliliter beaker to measure a volume of water. With all these three instruments, we are going to measure 50 mLs of water, and to compare the accuracy of those measurements, what you measure with each one of these devices, we are going to weigh the water. And you heard that correctly. So we are not going to measure 50 mLs, but to compare that accuracy between these devices, we are going to use a 100 milliliter beaker to take the weight of water, and based on that weight determine which of these instruments is more accurate. Okay, additionally we will be using a larger beaker. It doesn't really matter if it's a 400, a 200 or a 1 liter beaker. All we want to do with this is just to hold the water that we are going to be measuring. So for this, I would prefer if you don't use tap water. We are going to use deionized water, and this is here in this container. Let's see, there is only one here in the lab right now, so you just measure. This doesn't have to be measured. It's just however much water you need to complete the experiment. Okay, even if it doesn't is not enough, then you can still get more water. Okay, so first thing to do is it doesn't really matter which one you start with. Let's say we start with the cylinder. Okay, and all you have to do is just pour water. It's pretty simple to use, and you want to be as close to 50 mLs as possible. Okay, now one thing that I want you to notice here is that the water will form a curve there. Well, right now is not showing very well, but you want the bottom of that curve to touch the line of measurement. Okay, it's not the top of whatever water you have here, is the bottom of that. That bottom is what we call the meniscus. Now my pulse is not very good right here. I do recommend that for whatever instrument you are using to measure water, if it can stand on the bench, just do it that way, and then you measure the volume accordingly. Okay, so you are looking at the bottom of that meniscus. Wherever that meniscus touches, that is the volume that you're measuring. In this case, you want to measure 50 mLs of water. Okay, so the next step is you have your 100 ml beaker, and we want this, you want to take the weight of this beaker. Okay, so that's a number that you have to record, and you can keep it. You don't have to measure the weight of the beaker every time that you use it, because you're going to use it several times here. Okay, so you take the weight, you keep that weight, do not tear the beaker, just use as it is. Okay, and then you just, I prefer if you do this outside of the balance. So just pour the water in the beaker. Okay, make sure you completely empty the cylinder, and then you put the beaker back. Make sure you close the doors on the balance, and then you record that number. Okay, so that is the mass of the beaker plus water. To have the mass of water, then you have to subtract the mass of the beaker from this number. Okay, you will do this 2 more times to have triplicate measurements on the cylinder. Okay, now once you are done with this, then you can return the water back to the large beaker, and at this point I would like you to dry the beaker up, okay, so that you don't take the water that is the water already in the beaker. Okay, so you repeat that with the cylinder 2 more times, and then you move into the next measuring device. It doesn't really, again, doesn't really matter in which order you do this, as long as you do it. So with the 200 ml beaker, you're gonna do the same. You want to measure 250 ml of water, and here, well, you do the best you can. Okay, so again, here you try to identify the meniscus, and the meniscus should touch the line of the 50 ml mark. And then same thing, right? So you pour the water in the smaller beaker, and then you go back and take the weight of the beaker. Again, remember, now this is the volume that you measure with the beaker, so make sure you record that data properly. Okay, so here again, to calculate the amount of water that you pour into this beaker, then you have to subtract the weight of the smaller beaker from this number. Back to this, dry it again, and now we will start with the kind of more advanced instrument here. Okay, so that is the pipette. Now, to use the pipette, you need to use along with this bulb, and this bulb, it's back in the day, that was a advanced piece of equipment. Okay, you just put it here. The good thing about this one is that you don't have to remove it to complete the assignment. Okay, at this point there are 3 valves in this bulb. You have a top one, you have a middle, let's just bottom one, let's call this the bottom one, and then you have the side one. Okay, and there is a specific purpose behind each one of those valves. So with at this point, this bulb is completely filled, so there is nothing that we can do with this the way it is. So in order to remove the air from this bulb, you push or you press the top valve. Okay, and then while you do that, then you squeeze the bulb, and when you let it go, it remains squeezed, and then you are ready to start measuring water in this one. Okay, so you put the tip of the pipette inside the water, and now you use the bottom valve here. Okay, so you press it, and then the water will start coming up the pipette. It might not get all the way to where you want it, Okay, we still need to go a little more because the measuring mark for this pipette is right here. Okay, so we still have a little more water to go here. So we repeat the operation of squeezing the valve by pressing the top valve. Okay. So when we do that, then we are ready to continue. And then the goal is to get as close to that mark as possible. Okay, right at this point, the meniscus should touch that line. Okay, and this is better if you hold it on your hands. They cannot stand by itself in the bench. Okay, so at this point, this pipette is measuring the volume you are required to measure. Then you go to the smaller beaker, and then you press or you squeeze the side bulb. And when you do that, then it will let the air in, and then you will be emptying the pipette. Yeah, it takes more time, but you'll get used to it. Now, one thing that I want you to notice is that in the tip of the pipette, there is a small drop. Okay, that is supposed to be there. So do not try to squeeze this out. Even if you see small drops here, do not worry about that. That's part of your discussions here. Okay, so you are measuring the volume, how accurate this device is to measure that particular volume. So once you measure the volume, you go back, you take your beaker back to your scale, and then you measure your weight. Again, the amount of water that you added would be the difference between this weight and the mass of the beaker. Now you have, at this point, we have measured 50 ml of water with 3 different glassware pieces. We use a cylinder, we use a volumetric pipette, and we use a beaker. You are going to compare the accuracy of these 3 instruments, and you need to measure those 50 ml in triplicate. That means you will measure 50 ml of water 3 times with the cylinder, 3 times with the volumetric pipette, and 3 times with the beaker.